You need to have an app. How many P's in application? 2 or 1? Well, for now, we're only going to do 1. We're going to talk about the most important thing in operating your rental property. Before you even buy a property, you better learn how to rent it, because that is the key to being successful in rental property. The biggest mistake you're gonna make in the rental business is not renting to the right person or not properly screening your tenant. I've had so many horror stories because I felt sorry for people. I believe they're bullshit, okay? When you rent an apartment to somebody or a house, you're letting this person in your life. You're depending on this person to pay you and not make your life miserable, because they can, believe me. I've had people that would offer to pay me a year in advance, but I said no. I learned. All money ain't good money. Yeah, they're gonna give me that big chunk of money up front, and then for the next year, they're gonna make my life hell. I don't need it. You need to know how to screen your tenants or prospective tenants, and you better make sure you do everything you need to do. The first thing you need to do is, when you meet someone at your rental property, or even before you meet them, you need to have an app. How many P's in application? 2 or 1? Well, for now, we're only going to do 1. Application. Okay? Make it 2. What the hell? You need an application for them to fill out. And I'm going to tell you, you better get a copy of the driver's license with it to make sure the information on the driver's license matches the application. Okay? Because people will bamboozle you. You better make sure you sign up with some sort of tenant screening company. It don't cost much. Plus, they're going to pay the cost of screening them. The money you got to pay to the screening company, you can charge with the application. And you better make sure that you prove all that. You need to verify everything that's on the application. If they say they work somewhere, you better call that employer up and verify that they're really working there, or get pay stubs, but you better make sure that they got that money to pay that rent. You definitely want to run credit. The only time you can be somewhat lenient on credit is if you're renting through the Section 8 program, because now you got the housing authority helping them and subsidizing their rent. And that's the reason why they're on Section 8. So I was always very lenient, with people on Section 8, because that's why they were on Section 8. They didn't have a lot of money, they had a rough time. But if you got the housing authority backing you up, you can be a little lenient, but not too much. Okay, if they're the type of people that go out and they're just got a million credit cards, and they never paid, and they don't like to pay their bills, the phone bills, electric bills. If somebody can't pay their electric bill, you don't want to rent to them. Because while they're living in your place, they got to pay an electric bill. You want to make sure that someone can earn, if they don't have any help from the city and they're paying the rent, they're responsible for the entire rent, I would say 2.5 times the minimum. A lot of people want 3 times the rent. So if the rent's $800 a month, you want that person making $200 to $2,400 a month. That's the most important thing, that they can afford the property. You want to make sure these people haven't been evicted. You want to make sure that these people are working. You want to do a criminal background check. Let me tell you something. They can pay the rent, but if they're criminals, you don't want them in your property. These people are now in your life. Everything they do reflects on you because you own that property. I know landlords that had their properties taken away and knocked down because the tenants caused so many problems for the city that the city said, you know what? We're abating this property, or whatever the procedure they went through. You don't want to even think about going through that. Okay, you don't want people doing anything illegal on your property, because when they're in your property, you're responsible. Here's your house you're renting out, or your apartments. Here's your apartments. There's the door. There's apartment number 1, apartment number 2. Number 1 is vacant. Number 2, you got a long-term tenant living there. All right, if I own this duplex right here, I go ahead, have some people email me or send me some applications, and then we would do a showing. So here I am. This is me. Muscles, all these muscles, look at that. All right, this is me. All right, here I am.
Can you draw a bird?
No, no more birds. And then, here is Joe Schmo, or Josephine Schmo. Yeah, stick people are easy to draw. Hi, I'm here to rent your apartment out. Well, come on in and take a look. I don't judge people by their cars or stuff like that, but I want to kind of see how they got here. I can't draw a car. Now, if you got 6 people sitting in a car waiting for her and the music's playing, blah, 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 you better check out who her friends are, because once she moves in, then all these people are going to come hang out. And then number 2 is going to become vacant. So you gotta make sure you know who you're renting to. But I'm telling you now, you better check them out, and you better tell them, you better look them in the eye once you agree to rent to them, and you may say, listen, I'm only renting this property to you and whoever else is on this application. If they start moving people in there, you're violating the lease agreement and you will be evicted. Okay, tell everybody up front, you don't play. You know, I rent to a lady with 1 child, and I'll come back a month later, she's got another woman living there with 3 kids, and this guy came out of jail and he ain't got nowhere to stay, and next thing you know, you got a big mess on your hands. What else? You can try to get a first month, the last month, and a security deposit. So if the place rents for about $800 a month, you should try, providing the person can handle it, and you know, $2,400. You know, if they tear the place up, if they don't pay the rent, you know, you need that cushion to protect yourself. And you better have a good lease too, that tells all the rules. On top of the lease, we have a separate addendum just for all the rules we make them sign, saying, here, these are the rules of the place. Okay, you can never tell people enough about the rules, because people like to break rules. Be very careful, because whatever goes on in that house, you're ultimately responsible if you're the owner. And you better have liability insurance on it too. So anything happens and somebody wants to sue you over somebody falling, somebody, whatever, a fight break out, who the heck knows? I've seen it all. You want to make sure you're covered with insurance on the property and liability. Screen your tenants, because these people are now part of your life. When I was a property manager, I had to play their finance. They came to me with their problems. I was their banker. I was their psychiatrist. I was their marriage counselor. I was everything to these people. You know, that's, you know, the way it was. But you want to try to find people that are strong, independent people that are going to pay your rent, take care of your property, and not cause you no headaches. Right? Then you'll be successful, and everybody will live happily ever after. But screening your tenant is the first step when you own a rental property. And that's one step you don't want to slip up on. You know, everybody's situation is different. Everything is negotiable. You know, it's like, for instance, if you walk into a property and somebody comes to you and says, hey, I only want to rent it for 6 months. Well, you're going to pay what they call a month-to-month fee. Here in Florida, you have to rent at least 7-month lease. Otherwise, you're subject to an additional tax. Okay, but if somebody wants to rent for a longer period of time and you want to discount the rent a little, everything's negotiable. How easy is it to rent this place? You know, if it's real easy to rent, then you can afford to be pretty choosy at who you rent to. If it's a hard place to rent, well, you may have to make some allowances. It's common called lease with an option to purchase. That's a whole different situation. That's for people that want to sell their house eventually, or right now they want to sell it but they can't. So they're willing to lease it to somebody, and then a portion of that lease payment every month will go towards the down payment on purchasing the house. That's for people that typically want to sell, landlords that want to sell. If you have a house, you want to sell it, but you put it on the market, it ain't selling, you could offer it as a lease with an option to purchase. If the person doesn't exercise their option at the end of the lease, you keep all the money. If they do, then that portion of the money you agreed on will be credited towards the sale of that property. Listen, if a tenant's not paying you or they're causing you headaches, you got to get rid of them, trust me. And I used to give chances to people and, they just keep, same thing happen over and over again. Just bite the bullet and get rid of them. You want it to be a match. You want the round peg to fit in a round hole. If a tenant damages your property, they're responsible. It's clearly in the lease. Make sure your lease spells all these things out. If something is normal wear and tear or normal maintenance, typically it's the landlord's responsibility to repair it or maintain it. Now, if you're renting them a house, you could make a deal where they are responsible for more things than someone versus living in an apartment, like taking care of the yard. If you have a 20-unit apartment building and you got landscaping, the tenants aren't taking care of it, you got to have a landscape company take care of it. But if it's a single-family house and they're the ones that are only using the property, a lot of times you can require them to maintain the grounds while they live in the house. Condos are difficult at times, because they're living around other people. They got to act accordingly to live around other people.
Have you bought condos or just apartments for rent?
I'm sure somewhere down the road I've owned some condos and I've rented them out, You can't take a family and put them in a one-bedroom, okay? You got to make sure there's enough room for everybody to sleep. I wouldn't have more than 2 people living in a one-bedroom, whether it's a couple or maybe 2 people that aren't a couple, And you got to make sure that nobody sublets your apartment. You don't want to rent your apartment to somebody and they got it on Airbnb or they're renting it out to somebody else. The lease tells all these things. So, and you got to stick by the rules, because if you bend, next thing you know, you're bending all the time. You got to collect your money on time. You got to collect a late charge if they don't pay it on time. If you're renting to students, I would highly advise you get a parental guarantee. That means you got to take an application not only from the student, you need the parent to fill out an application and make sure the parent is really the one you're renting the apartment to. You're letting the student live there, but everything has to have financial responsibility from the parent. So you got to check the parent's credit, you got to check their history, you have to do a full application on them, and as if you're renting to them, because they're going to be responsible for whatever that student does. They move out of your place and they tore it apart, then you're going to have to, send them a letter itemizing all the damage that was done, show them how the security deposit was applied, and whatever's left, you got to send them a bill. If they don't pay it, you probably got to take them to small claims court. We call them SODAs. Statement of deposit account. Okay, not Coca-Cola, not Pepsi, not Mountain Dew, but statement of deposit account showing how you applied their deposit, how you're handling, if they didn't do any damage, you have to send them a full refund. If they did any damage, you have to deduct it on an account showing what you had fixed, what you charged, and what's left. And as they exceeded their deposit, you have to send them a bill. You can only charge the tenant for damage. If it's normal wear and tear, you can't charge the tenant for it. Yeah, so if they smoke up the place, yeah, you can charge them to repaint it, and then and whatever you got to do to get the smoke out. If the pet pisses on the carpet, and you got to clean it or replace it, you charge the tenant. Mm-hmm. Another thing is, if they have pets, you can charge a pet fee. Make sure whenever you rent to somebody, you have emergency contact. You need to know that if something happens with this person, things happen every day. People die, people get sick, they got to go to the hospital. You need to make sure that there are people that you can go to if there's a problem with your tenant and say, hey, I ain't seen so-and-so around and they haven't paid their rent. Call the emergency contact up and they'll tell you what's going on, hopefully. If God forbid they pass away, call the emergency contact, said, hey, who's responsible to take care of this person's affairs? And I would also recommend to the tenant that you're renting to that they should get renter's insurance to cover their belongings. You as a landlord are not responsible for their personal belongings unless you cause the damage yourself. Typically, you want a tenant to get renter's insurance. If there is an accident that happens there, whatever the case may be, the tenant's got insurance of their own to collect. Better they collect from insurance than collect from you. I hope these tips will come to good use, because when you move somebody in your property you own, you're responsible ultimately. And then make sure you subscribe, you like, you dislike, you do it all. So this Polak can leave me alone. Adios, amigos. Now I'm gonna get in trouble for saying Polak.